in the United States. So people ask me, from where are you? And I always say Chilean, but I go back to Chile and I know I don't belong there either. The country has changed, I have changed, the world has changed. So I don't find the country that I have in my heart. What?
It sounds like others share that experience too.
Yeah. But you know, what I think, and I always tell, especially young people who have moved to this country and feel that nostalgia, that feeling that you don't belong, that you don't know the clues, that it's confusing. I always say, don't let go of who you are, of all the stuff you bring with you, your language, your customs, your traditions, all that, and you can have the best of everything. You don't have to forget who you are in order to become someone else. That someone else can be a combination of all the good things that you bring with you.
This is a theme that comes up in your writing time and time again. In A Long Petal of the Sea, one of our common read books, the characters experience this feeling of being outsiders in different places and feeling displaced, yet also finding themselves at the same time and adapting to the situations that they're in.
But the Long Petal of the Sea is based on a real event. Before the Second World War, there was a civil war in Spain that lasted 3 years. 1 million people died. It was horrible, a war between brothers and sisters. And the fascists won the war, and 500,000 refugees left in 24 hours and crossed the border into France. Can you imagine 500,000 people in one day in the country? The French didn't know what to do with them. They put them in concentration camps that they improvised on the beaches. And the poet, Pablo Neruda, Chilean poet, convinced the government of Chile to receive some refugees. So he chartered a ship called the Winnipeg and brought to Chile 2,200 Spanish refugees. Those people were very lucky. First of all, they escaped the fascists. They escaped the Second World War that started the day they arrived in Chile. But most important, they were received with open arms. The whole country was delighted to have, well, except the Catholic Church because they were atheists, and the right, the conservatives, because they were communists. But they were received with joy. There was a crowd at the port with flags and food and the Spanish songs. They greeted them into their homes. And the descendants of those people, who are now probably 15,000 people in Chile, have done for the country incredible things. If you look at the names of who are the top professors, historians, astronomers, musicians, artists in Chile, they are descendants from the immigrants of the Winnipeg. So those people found a country, but that's not the usual experience of refugees. They find hostility.
Well, I was going to ask about that. My students, I think I have some students here today. Do we have students? There they are. They're over there.
Are you grading them or something?
Yes.
I knew. That's why they're here.
They have. Yeah. They've got to clap the loudest and laugh the hardest.
I know, yeah.
They noted in class that there was a portion of the book where there's some anti-immigrant rhetoric for the Spanish who are coming in, and they noticed some parallels between, as you mentioned, what those on the right and the Catholic Church were saying about the immigrants and some of the rhetoric that we've heard here in this country. And so I was wondering if you could talk about the parallels that you might see of hostility toward immigrants.
Well, it's not only in the United States, it's worldwide. That there is masses of refugee, and interestingly, most are women and children. And they're never or very seldom well received anywhere. And the rhetoric, you can find the same rhetoric in Germany as you do here, as you did ago in Chile. And it's the same thing. They are coming to change the country. They have other ideas. They are people of another color. They come to take our jobs. They bring foreign ideas. And depending if it's the right or the left, the rhetoric changes a bit, but it's the same idea. It's very racist because we are tribal people, and that happens all over. I mean, what our human condition is that we get together in tribes and we feel protected and safe there, and anybody who tries to come in is rejected. It's like animals do that too. So it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of heart and a lot of education to welcome everybody and to include everybody. It's very difficult.
Well, you mentioned the tribalism that happens everywhere, and we see it in your novels, especially along Petal of the Sea, with political divisions that in those situations in Chile and in Spain lead to the overthrowing of democracy by fascist, authoritarian figures and movements. And my students have also noted, the political divisions that seem to be increasing here in the United States today. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what's happening, given your observations of the world and here in the United States.
I'm horrified, but I see the same thing happen in France, for example. So it's not just us. But democracy is in danger in the United States and in the world. And if you look at the map of the world, it's not most people that live under the democracy. Most people live under other regimes that are authoritarian for one reason or another. So what we have, we are not aware of how valuable it is until we lose it. And I can say this because this happened to me. I lived in Chile, who was the longest and most solid democracy in Latin America. And in 24 hours, we had a military coup and the country changed completely. And for 17 years, we had a regime of repression and terror for many people. Many people got out, many people disappeared, many were tortured and killed. When I say disappeared, it's hard to understand what it is. People were arrested and you could never hear from them again. And they would deny that they had been arrested. Bodies were never found. And to this day, there are families looking for their children and grandchildren that disappeared during that time. So it's hard to understand what is at stake here until you experience the loss. It's like health. You don't know what it is to be healthy until you get sick.
With a novel like Along Petal of the Sea, how can reading these stories of historical times in other places, are they a warning to us? Is there a lesson to learn?
No, I'm not preaching. I'm not giving a message. When I write fiction, I just want to tell a story because I like the story. And I like storytelling. Now, if I write nonfiction like The Soul of a Woman, well, then I can preach. It doesn't matter because there's something specific that I want to say. But I imagine that there must be an inner reason that I'm not aware of. Why I choose that story. Why I want those characters to say that and nothing else, to experience that and nothing else. It's because in a way, I'm trying to explore something within myself. So it's either a memory or something from my past or something that is an obsession or something that worries me terribly. And then it becomes, I transform it, I put it into a story. Everything can be a story for me. My brain is so weird that I can't think in a rational way. I can't play any game. I cannot even nothing, because I cannot think straight. I think in circles, in spirals, and that's how I get the stories. And that's the only thing I remember. I don't remember people, faces, my grandchildren. I don't remember anything. But I remember a good story. I never forget it.
When you're telling stories in historical fiction, I had a student ask today, I asked my students, what should I ask Isabelle when we're on stage? And one student said, ask her her favorite color. And I said, well, we'll save that
what a
one.
shitty question.
But, another student asked,
Sorry if the student is here.
he knows who he is.
Oh, it's a he. Yeah.
Another student
It's
asked,
red, by the way.
Another student asked, when you're writing historical fiction, how do you know what from the history to put in and what from the fiction to put in? How do you balance those things? Or what do you do in the process of writing historical fiction? Like,
First, research. If there is a time, a place, and an event that I research completely as much as I can from different angles, not the history books, but other voices also, then I have the stage where I will move my characters. And the characters in their lives or in whatever happens to them will be telling the historical events. But it's easy to write historical fiction because half the book is given by the research. So I love that. But you have to find a moment or an event that I'm passionate about. For example, I wrote a book called Island Beneath the Sea, which is the story of the only slave revolt in history that has succeeded. And that was in Haiti in 1800. And why would I write about African slaves in Haiti? I don't have any connection to that. In Chile, there were no plantations, no African slaves. We enslaved the Indians, but we didn't bring Africans. And so why would I be so interested in this? The book took me 4 years, the hardest research that you can imagine, because slavery is a horrible thing. You can't imagine what people with power and impunity can do to other people. I mean, the cruelty is appalling. So I got really sick researching that book, but I finished it eventually. And then when I finished the book, I realized why I had written it. The theme of the book, of course, is slavery, but deeper than slavery is what I just said, power with impunity. And that happens not only the master and the slave, it happens the policeman that stops a black person in the street. It's the power with impunity of the man that beats up a woman and nobody knows, or beats up a child. It's the power of impunity of those people who are cruel with animals. It's the military when they are invading a country, what's happening today in Ukraine. So nobody is accountable for what's happening today in Ukraine. So that's the kind of power that obsesses me, because there are other forms of you can commit crimes, you can be violent, but if there is accountability, there is some kind of fairness in the game, But if not, then what can you do? And I lived it in Chile during the years after the dictatorship. That's power with impunity. And I'm telling you, it's terrible.
well, within those stories of power with impunity, we also see really strong characters come through in your writing, and especially strong female characters. And in your nonfiction writing, we also see your critiques of patriarchy, in particular, that power with impunity. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about yourself as a feminist and your formative experiences as a feminist.
Well, I became a feminist at 5. Really, there was no word, but I know that I was a feminist. I was living in my grandfather's house with my bachelor uncles and my brothers, and the women in the family, my mother and the maids in the house who did all the work, had no power, no voice, no money, no freedom, nothing, while the males had everything that the women did not. So I didn't want to be like my mother, although I loved her. I wanted to be like my grandfather. And then around puberty, when I realized that I had two prunes here, I thought, what is this thing? And I realized I could not be a man, but I thought at least I can live like one. And then my life has been about, first of all, being independent, because there is no feminism if you are not independent. And the first form of independence is to be able to support oneself, and if possible, the children. So my life has been about that, and I have worked with women and for women all my life. I know them well. So when people say, oh, where do you get these characters, these female characters, so strong, so resilient? Well, I don't know any weak woman. Do you? I don't. And then I have a foundation that I don't run. My daughter-in-law runs it, Lori. And through the foundation, I get to hear the stories of women who have gone through hell. They have lost everything, some of them including their children. And yet they get back on their feet, they survive, and some of them become leaders in their communities. So they are there. It's just a matter of being inspired by those wonderful, extraordinary people.
Well, I'm glad you brought up your foundation. I was going to ask you, the foundation seeks to advance the freedoms and rights of women, including reproductive rights. And the news last week with the leak of the Supreme Court document and the potential for Roe versus Wade to be overturned here in the country, I was curious, what was your reaction to that news?
I was horrified, first because we have been supporting, the foundation has been supporting Planned Parenthood and many other organizations that work for reproductive rights. And because I grew up in a country where there was no possibility of abortion. We have abortion now in Chile very recently only, but there are places, one of them is, for example, El Salvador or Honduras or other places, where if you have a miscarriage, you can go to prison, Guatemala also, you can go to prison for 30 years because it's supposedly you have committed a murder. So everybody is very worried about the embryo. And what about the woman? What about the woman and her life? So you can have, if you have religious beliefs, don't get an abortion, but it has to be available for those people who need it and who don't have those restrictions. So why impose on everybody what a minority wants?
Your foundation also advocates for women's freedom from violence. And in The Soul of a Woman, you write, we have to consider violence against women for what it is, the greatest crisis that faces humanity. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, there's a war, an ongoing war against women. It sounds exaggerated when I say this, but think about it. Think about the many forms in which the patriarchy puts women down. It exerts violence, restriction against women, repression of all kinds. We live in a very free society here, but my foundation works also in places where women are not free. Think about what happened and how easily women lose the rights that they take for granted. It can happen very fast. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Women who had been professionals working out there for 20 years, comes the Taliban, and in 24 hours they are under a burqa inside their homes. So it can be lost so easily that we have to be aware. And when they say, well, feminism is passé, it's not. And thank God now we have the Me Too movement who has given new energy to the feminist movement. And the young women are becoming very aware of how easily they can lose everything. Now, if Roe versus Wade is reverse, you say? Overturned. Now you will be in the streets. Now you will be in the streets screaming like the feminists that we were when I was young, because you will realize then what has been taken away from you. It's a right, an option that you should have.
I was going to ask, as a feminist today, what do you have for us?
What I have seen in my life, we have come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. But I was born in the middle of the Second World War in the 40s in Chile, in an authoritarian, patriarchal, Catholic family and society. And I have seen in my lifetime all what we have achieved as women. And I thought when I was young that it was such a fair, such a reasonable struggle that in a matter of a decade, we would have ended the patriarchy. I was very optimistic. And now I see that it will take many more years, but it will happen because the curve is going someplace. We go back sometimes. There is backlash, but it will not be stopped.
This resonates. This resonates with something you said once that really stood out to me, that you aim to not just make the world better, but to make it good.
Yeah, better from what? It has to be good, really good, and that's possible. But we have to start by dreaming it, by imagining it. Have a vision of what world we want. We want a world that is inclusive, that is beautiful, that is compassionate, that is very different from that respects nature and treats other species with respect and with love. That's the world we want. We want a world in which greed and interest will not be what moves everything. It will be other things, just community, the joy of sharing. I think it's possible.
Can sharing stories help us get there?
I think that stories connect us. And, my books are all over, and we get a lot of mail. And when I read what my readers write to me, I see that there's things in common, threads in common. And often people say, you changed my life because I saw in that book or in this book this and that. And I realize that I haven't done anything. I have only put in words, in written words, what they already feel. People who connect to my books is because they think and feel like me. And so we are connected in a way that is very subliminal, but it's there. I haven't taught anything to anybody. I have just punched the button and made it happen because it's there inside their hearts.
Your latest novel, Violetta, I think connects to us in some ways. The main character, Violetta, writes in that novel, the world is paralyzed and humanity is in quarantine. It is a strange symmetry that I was born in one pandemic and will die during another. Can you talk a little bit about your new novel, Violetta?
I had so much fun writing it. I hope you have fun reading it if you do. When my mother died before the pandemic, everybody said you have to write about your mother because I had such a deep connection with her. We wrote to each other every single day for decades. So I have thousands and thousands of letters. And so it was just natural that I would write about her, but I couldn't. I was just too close. But there was something else also. My mother was an extraordinary woman who lived in extraordinary times. But my mother was never independent. And this is what touches with what I said before. My mother first depended from her father, then her first husband, then the second husband, and eventually at the end of her life, me. So she never could support herself, and therefore she was always like frustrated. She could never do or explore all her talents, her vision, everything she wanted to do, because somebody else was paying the bills and giving the orders. So she wasn't the right character for a novel, but I could create a character that would have economic independence and therefore the freedom that my mother didn't have. So I could give to this character everything I wanted from my mom. And that was fun. And Violetta is born, like my mother, in 1920, which is when the first pandemic, the influenza pandemic, reached Chile. And died, and she dies, Violetta, in 2020, when we have the virus, the COVID. And in those 100 years, that is her life, I had the pleasure of telling a lot about the 20th century, which I witnessed also.
This pandemic has been difficult for a lot of people, and I'm curious to know, what has your experience of it been?
Well, it's been a very schizophrenic thing, because on one hand, I am very aware of how much people, especially women, have suffered. Through the foundation, we see a terrible increase in domestic violence to begin with. The first to lose their jobs were women. They will be the last to get them back. Trapped at home, schooling the kids with less income, less resources, and often with a companion that is drinking too much and that is as frustrated as they are. So the situation for most of the women I know through the foundation has been awful. But for me personally, it's been great, because I have been in the attic writing, and I have never been more productive in my life. I wrote The Soul of a Woman, Violetta, another book and another short story. And if you give me a little bit more time, I can come up with another book in a few weeks. I mean, it's wonderful. Plus, I was recently married. So on one hand, I was trapped at home with this new husband that I knew very little. And let me tell you, at our age, there is a lot of baggage, a lot. But also, I had kindness. I had someone I wasn't alone. I think that if I had faced the pandemic alone with the dogs, it would have been pretty hard. So even if sometimes living together is hard because you have to share everything, it's much better than loneliness, for me at least. I've been with a man all my life. I think I fell in love the first time when I was around 7. And I have had many men in my life, but not all at the same time. So they have been one at a time, and it works fine for me. I have had 3 marriages, and the first 2 one lasted 29 years, and the other one 28 years. The first one should have ended on year number 20, and the second one also 20. The other years were just trying to fix what was unfixable. And so now that I am married for the 3rd time, I think that if I live long enough, it will be 20 more years. I can have a 4th husband. Yeah.
You mentioned in Soul of a Woman that in this pandemic, the sales of guns in the United States has soared, while in Chile, it's the sales of chocolate and wine and condoms that has soared. So my question is, what are they doing right and what are we doing wrong?
Well, in Italy, it was the same. It was wine and condoms. Well, we are doing a lot of things wrong. The first thing that is sort of silly is that the country would be polarized and divided because of the pandemic. I mean, you can be divided for politics, and but something that is a public health issue should unite people, not divide them. We should all be in the same boat trying to deal with the virus.
So you've been at home writing in close quarters with your new husband. You've said recently...
He's not here. That's why I can't talk like that.
You've talked a lot in recent writings and speeches about finding love and romance later in life.
Well, let's say love.
And you've said that your old age is a precious gift. That's a direct quote. And so I'm curious to know, what's love like after 37, say?
At 80, you mean? What's love like? You know, I'm taking a philosophy class, and the last class, we dealt with the theme of love, how love has been treated along the ages by different philosophers. That's the class. And the Greeks said that love has 3 stages. The first stage is called eros, when you find the person and you think nobody's more beautiful and smarter and wonderful. That's eros, when you fall madly in love. And usually doesn't last very much because it's an altered state of mind. I mean, you are crazy. And then there comes philia, which is the friendship, the sympathy, the time you share, that can last a very long time. And then there is a third stage, which is, it happens very seldom, which is called agape. And that is when you love so much that you want the happiness of that person more than your own. And I think that happens to all mothers with their kids, but very seldom with their husband. For example, let's say that Roger comes to me tomorrow and says, you know what, I fell in love with the blonde next door. I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes. And if I am in the agape stage, I would say, oh, I want you to be happy. Please feel free. Can I help in any way? Maybe I can talk to her and tell her, how do you like your eggs for breakfast? Now, I know that I will never reach that stage. I would cut his balls. So when you ask me how is love at this age, I didn't go through the eros stage because I was just too old. I mean, I was 70 something and he was the same age. It was not as if I was in front of Antonio Banderas. No. So let's skip that part. And then we come into the second part, which is the wonderful friendship, all you share. And there's romance in that too. And we really spend wonderful time together. And I think that's good enough. Very good, actually. Now, would I change all this that we have achieved for one night with Antonio Banderas? I would have to think about it.
Is your husband, Roger, retired?
No, but when he retires, he will be really screwed because I don't have time for him. Really, I don't. So he will have to take some sport. I don't know what he will do. Maybe that will be the agape stage. And I will say, you want the blonde? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, you've written about retirement and the differences in English and Spanish. In English, it's retirement, to retire, to go away somewhere.
But in Spanish, it's jubilarse, which comes from the word júbilo, which means jubilation. It's the time when supposedly it's the best time in your life. Unfortunately, when it happens, you have less resources, your health is failing, it's not the most joyful unless you have prepared for that.
Do you plan to retire?
No. I mean, if I retire, my son would go crazy because I have too much energy. So I would start moving the furniture and doing things that he would have to do. I would just have to give the orders. Yeah.
Well, we have quite a few questions from the audience here. I thought we could turn to those next. And just as by way of announcements, usually Isabelle is very happy to sign books after events like these, but due to COVID, we're going to have to skip the book signing tonight. But if you would like, you can find Isabelle's books up in the lobby. Book
and
passage.
They're already signed. And also we have, how do you call them, Nico? Book. So you can stick them there also.
Okay. And Book Passage has a table up in the lobby that you can check out. And we're very grateful to Book Passage for supporting College of Marin Library.
Thank you.
and for inviting Isabelle to come here tonight. So let's take a look here. Here's one for you. How scandalized were the readers by your body subject matter when Eva Luna first came out?
Body matter? Which body matter?
Body, I think in terms of the sexual content.
I hope they were delighted and aroused and not shocked. I mean, unless they were evangelicals, then why would they be shocked? And really, Eva Luna is a very sensual book. I wrote it in Venezuela, and it's a very Venezuelan book. It's about a place that I loved. Green, abundant, generous, happy in many ways. It has been in a terrible political crisis for a long time now. But the country is wonderful, and the people are so... I mean, any excuse is good for a party, for dancing and drinking and singing. That's wonderful.
Did you ever make it back?
And plus, they have the most beautiful women in the world. They win all the beauty pageants. And they, if you go to the beach in Venezuela, you see something. And the men, let me tell you, with these Speedos, incredible.
Do you ever make it back to those Venezuelan beaches?
Well, it's wonderful. Not right now. And it's too late for me now.
Maybe Antonio Banderas will be there. Here's another question from the audience. Who has influenced you most in your life and how?
The women I have met. The extraordinary women I have met, starting with my mother, of course, but many others that have, I mean, they have helped me all along the way, starting with my mother-in-law who helped me raise my kids, the women who worked in my house and raised the kids while I was working in something else, all the women in the foundation, my daughter-in-law, my daughter, my agent, they're all women. The men that have helped me along the way have been my grandfather, my stepfather, and my son. And that's it. The rest are all women.
We have another question from the audience. What is your relationship with Chile today? How has it changed over the years?
I am in touch permanently. I mean, on chat with friends daily. And I follow the news. And I'm fascinated with what's happening right now in Chile. We have a very interesting political situation. But I don't think I could live there because the people I love the most are here. My work is here, the foundation, everything is here. So I will probably die here, but I will always have a foot in Chile. And right now, it's fascinating because Chile has elected a new government that is a leftist, a coalition of the left. And the president is 36 years old, Gabriel Boric. And the agenda is the plan for the government, and that's how he was elected, is that there's gender parity for everything. So women are in the same position as men in every aspect of the government. And to prove it, the cabinet is 14 women and 10 men. There is great focus on environment and climate change, nature, inclusion. Everybody's included in the country, even immigrants as well. It's the idea also that the natural resources have to belong to the people or benefit the people at least. They cannot be all in private hands. The constitution that we have had since the dictatorship privatized everything. So everything, even the water that you drink, belongs to somebody. And there's a huge middle class that lives on credit. There's hidden poverty, and 20% of the population that are not sheltered by the state. So they handle little businesses. They sort of manage their lives without even thinking that the government is there to help. And so that needs to change. And I think that They have great opposition. The conservatives are very powerful and they own the country. They have also they don't have any majority in the Congress, so to pass any law is difficult. Plus, they have no experience, political experience. They have just good intentions. So I don't know if they will be able to do what they want, but it's a beautiful plan. It's a project.
You mentioned you'll always have one foot in Chile. Does it feel like home for you here in
Yeah,
Marin?
yeah, it does. Absolutely. I've lived in Marin since I came here in 1987, imagine. This is my home is here. As I said before, the people I love, my dogs. So, of course, this is my home.
This question circles back to Along Petal of the Sea. How many of the characters in the book are based on real people?
Most of them. Most of them. Pablo Neruda, of course, who got the Winnipeg and brought the people. But the character of Victor in the book is based on Victor Pay, a friend of mine who was one of the passengers in the Winnipeg, and he told me the story.
Elizabeth Eidenberg, was she also a historical
Yeah, she's
figure?
a historical figure, yes.
Her story was amazing in Along Petal of the Sea as
It's
well.
a beautiful story. This is a woman who spent her life working for children in zones of war, in places of war. So she would go from one war to another, helping the children. And she was Austrian, I think. I don't remember very well. I think she was Austrian. And she ended up quietly in her little village, a very quiet old age, until people remembered. The people she had saved became adults, and they remembered. And they looked for her to thank her. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story.
You have a rigid writing process. Could you describe that for us?
Yeah, I start all my books on January 8th because you have to have a date to start or I would be procrastinating forever. That means that by January 7th, I am prepared. I know that the next day I have to start something. So I always work in the morning. I'm not good at night. And so I wake up around 5:30, but I don't get up until 6:30. And that gives me time to have my coffee, walk the dogs, put on full makeup and high heels, and go up to the attic. And then I work several hours a day. But you know, the good thing about working at home is that I can go up every time that I have an idea, or if I wake up in the middle of the night. So it's very convenient for me. I work a lot, but I like it.
Do you have any advice for my students so they finish their papers on time?
Yeah, smoke pot. I don't know, something like that. Well, it's legal in California, isn't it?
We'll talk next week about the advice you've heard today. Well, I have a few hundred more questions here, but I think
Well, what's the time?
We have time for, I think, one more question. Isabelle, you've had so many accomplishments in your career, and you've had such a positive impact on so many people, millions of people, through your writing and your humanitarian work. And so I'm curious, what's next? What can we expect next?
You know, I live one day at a time, not because I'm old, but I've always lived one day at a time. I never make plans because my life has been up and down. There's been a lot of losses and tragedies and things that were completely unexpected and crossroads in which I think I'm going in one direction and something happens and I have to turn in another way. So I don't make plans. I try to live one day at a time, live today as fully as I can. And the only project I have is the book I'm writing now. I don't think about what I'm going to do on January 8th next year because maybe I will be dead. So what's the point of wasting my time? Yeah, that can happen.
Well, Isabelle, on behalf of College of Marin, thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isabelle Allende.